Gooding Company to the casual observer. Ford's dominance of the 24 Hours of Le Mans in the late 1960s can seem almost monolithic. After all, the winning was all done by GT40s, WASNT, while the small block Mark I cars that triumphed in 1968 and 1969 and the big block Mark IIs, which brought Ford its first overall victory at the Circuit de la Sarthe in 1966, shared real visual and mechanical continuity. The 1967 Mark IV was its own thing entirely. Advertisement. Continue. Reading Below The GT40 had been an Anglo-American proposition from the start, with roots in Eric Broadley's lovely little Lola Mark VI, but the Mark IV was to be a star-spangled affair, meant to erase all doubt that American know-how was superior to Italian 12-cylinder prancy-horsey voodoo, that it wasn't the luck of the limeys that had spurred the Yanks on to victory the previous year. Never mind that the winning car had been driven by a pair of Kiwis named Chris Amon and Bruce McLaren. The Mark IV, if not made of space-age stuff, was at least made of aerospace-age stuff. Its genesis was what Ford referred to as the J car, referring to Appendix J of the FIA rulebook, which laid out the specification to which the new racer would hew. The chassis was constructed of aluminum honeycomb with its segments bonded together. The windshield wiper was from a Boeing 707. It wasn't, however, quite a crash program one might imagine. Ford had begun work on the J-car with Michigan's Carcraft in 1965 after the GT40's first disappointing outings at La Sarthe. In fact, the car could have competed in 1966. Ford brought a J-car to France for pre-race testing, along with Amon and McLaren, and by the end of the day the new machine was the fastest thing out there. The Mark II, then in its second year of competition, seemed to be a safer bet than unleashing a new beast directly into a brutal environment that had, in short order, twice dashed Ford's aspirations. In retrospect, it was the right call. Advertisement. Continue. Reading Below. Meanwhile, back in the States, development took a tragic turn. During testing at the storied Riverside Circuit in Southern California in August of '66, driver Ken Miles was killed in a wreck. The J-car's bread van-like bodywork was then reworked to combat high-speed lift, a reshaping that ultimately resulted in the Mark IV. Advertisement. Continue. Reading Below. Advertisement. Continue. Reading Below. When Ford returned to Le Mans in 1967 with 4 Mark IVs, ready to combat Ferrari's new and formidable P4, there was at least one American driver in each of the cars. Denny Hulme and Lloyd Ruby failed to finish, as did Mario Andretti and Lucian Bianchi. Mark Donohue and Bruce McLaren placed fourth, and, famously, the Texas-California duo of A.J. Foyt and Dan Gurney finished first. The spraying of victory champagne was invented, and to this day the Red One car remains one of the most famous vehicles to have won the race. A rules change for 1968 meant that the big block Mark II and Mark IVs were no longer eligible for competition, so John Wyer dragged out some old Mark IIs and managed to pull 2 more Frankish 24-hour victories out of the old cars before Ferdinand Piech's Hail Mary Porsche 917s read the next chapter of Le Mans' dominance. But what we have here is not one of the cars that turned wheels in anger in Florida or France during 1967, although it has made the trek to Le Mans twice. Ford had Carcraft build 12 Mark IV chassis. In 1970, Harry T. Heinel bought 2 from Shelby American, J4, the car that he had won Sebring with Andretti and McLaren at the helm, and J7, the one Andretti crashed at Le Mans. A bare tub brought to Le Mans as a spare was part of the deal. 7 years later, the tub wound up in the hands of Brian Anglis, who later went on to own AC Cars, who also had acquired another tub from Ford. Anglis then sold his cache of Mark IV parts to Rod Leach of Hertfordshire, England, who decided to do something with the agglomeration of pieces. Namely, he decided to build a pair of Mark IVs. The cars were to be numbered J11 and J12. The car you see here is J12. Leach only had one full set of bodywork, so J12 got the original nose while J11 got the original tail. A tunnel-port 427 cubic inch V8 was sourced for the car, and a correct T44 transaxle was found new in crate in England in 1984. 10 years after Leach and Anglis began the Odyssey, the car was finished in time to make demonstration laps at that year's 24 Hours of Le Mans, 2 decades after Gurney and Foyt's victory.